Some lines should never be crossed, boundaries of decency and respect that separate civilized men from predators. A few weeks ago, a group of predators crossed one with my family. A crew of fake HOA enforcers, cloaked in the thinnest veil of legitimacy, rolled up to intimidate my 93-year-old mother on the ranch she has owned for 60 years. Their goal wasn't to enforce a rule, it was to execute a land grab. And when I put myself in their path, they made their final, fatal miscalculation. Their mistake was simple. They picked the one family in the entire state of Texas that was ready for a war, and by the time I was done, their entire crew was dismantled, zip-tied, and waiting for the law to collect them like the trash they were. Let me take you to the beginning, to the moment the fuse was lit. Before this takedown begins, drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story of justice echoes around the world. I've taken fire on 3 continents. I know what real pressure feels like. But I can tell you without any hesitation that nothing ignites my rage faster than a wolf targeting my family. My mom, Evelyn Hart, is the toughest woman I have ever known. She is a force of nature who, alongside my late father, carved a life out of the unforgiving Texas soil. The ranch is her legacy, her fortress, paid in full with 60 years of sweat and sacrifice. Every tax receipt is filed, every deed is clean. There is no legitimate homeowners association within 100 miles of us, a fact anyone with a computer and 10 seconds to spare could verify. But that didn't stop 3 thugs in cheap polo shirts with HOA Enforcement, poorly stenciled on the back, from marching up our half-mile-long gravel driveway, clipboards in hand, acting like they had a right to the ground beneath their feet. I was on the porch, oiling an old leather saddle, when they arrived. I watched them get out of their dusty sedan, a cloud of arrogance surrounding them. Their official complaint, as the lead troglodyte announced, was that my mother's prize-winning rose beds violated community uniformity standards. He then dared to claim that her 100-year-old barn, a structure that had survived droughts and hurricanes, obstructed non-existent HOA view corridors. It was pure, fabricated garbage. A child could see the lie, but they delivered it with the smug certainty of bullies who were used to their victims folding. They expected fear. They expected a confused old woman they could railroad. They got me. I stepped off the porch and met them halfway. There is no HOA here, I stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Under Texas Property Code Chapter 209, an HOA has 0 jurisdiction without a signed, filed declaration of covenants, which you don't have. You are trespassing on private agricultural land, which is a felony in this state. I'm giving you 30 seconds to get back in your car and disappear. The leader, a stocky brick of a man in wraparound sunglasses, just smirked. We can do this the easy way, he growled, or the hard way. That was the moment the switch in my head flipped. Years as a Navy SEAL taught me that de-escalation is always option 1. You use words to control a situation for as long as you can. But it also taught me how to recognize the precise moment when words fail, when a threat has already made its decision to escalate. At that point, your only option is to end it, decisively and completely. I took a step forward, my voice dropping into that dead calm register that my teammates used to call my kill voice. The hard way, I informed him, is the ground you're standing on. Their fatal mistake, the one that sealed their fate, was shifting their predatory gaze past me, toward my mom, who was now standing silently on the porch. That's when I moved. The first guy lunged, not at me, but trying to get past me, a pathetic intimidation tactic to scare my mother. It was a bad choice. It was his last choice. My hand shot out and caught his wrist mid-lunge, my fingers finding the nerve clusters with practiced ease. I twisted his arm in a way that bone is not meant to bend. and used his own forward momentum to drive him face first into the sharp gravel of the driveway. He screamed once, a sharp, choked-off sound. The second one, a taller, wiry snake, tried to flank me, reaching for my shoulder from behind. It was a rookie move, predictable and clumsy. I pivoted on my heel, my leg sweeping out and taking his feet from under him. He hit the dirt with a heavy, wet thud that sent his clipboard skittering into the dust, his head bouncing off the hard-packed earth. The third man, the leader, froze. His brain, slow and sluggish, was finally catching up to the catastrophic reality of his situation. He saw his two partners down and broken. In a final, desperate move, he reached inside his polo shirt, fumbling for whatever pathetic weapon he had hidden. I closed the distance in a single explosive step before his hand could clear the fabric. I hooked his arm at the elbow, neutralizing the threat, and slammed him backward against the rough, sun-bleached wood of the barn wall. The cheap folding knife he was fumbling for clattered uselessly to the ground. I leaned in close, my face inches from his. "Let me guess," I said, my voice low and cold. "You're not here about flowers. So tell me why you're really here, right now, or your arm is going to start coming apart at the joints." His bravado was gone, replaced by the sour stench of pure terror. "Your mom's sitting on prime development land," he spat, his eyes wide. "My boss wants it, and he always gets what he wants." That was the confession. That was the final piece of the puzzle. This wasn't a random HOA scam. This was a targeted, predatory shakedown orchestrated by a wealthy developer. They were using a fake HOA as a cover to terrorize my mother into selling her legacy for pennies on the dollar. That is the literal definition of extortion under the Texas Penal Code. And combined with felony trespass and assault, it meant they were going to prison for a very long time. I pulled a set of flex cuffs from the small pouch on my belt, a standard part of my everyday carry, and cinched their wrists behind their backs. I sat all three of them in the shade of the barn to contemplate their life choices. Then I switched on my body cam, which had been recording the entire encounter, and called the sheriff. While we waited, I went inside. My mom was at her kitchen table, calmly sipping a glass of iced tea as if she were just watching a rather boring television show. "They came to the wrong ranch, didn't they, dear?" she said, a steel-edged grin touching her lips. That's my mother, forged in 60 years of Texas grit. The sheriff and two deputies arrived 15 minutes later. They saw the three thugs zip-tied on the ground and me standing calmly on the porch. Once the senior sheriff, a man named Henderson, reviewed my body cam footage, he didn't waste a second. "These men aren't HOA," he confirmed, his voice grim. "They're unlicensed thugs from an enforcement company tied to a big-shot developer out of Austin. We've been building a RICO case against him for months. Your footage, son, might be the final nail in his coffin." They loaded the three idiots into the patrol cars. But I knew this wasn't the end. The man who sent them, the boss, who always gets what he wants, was still out there. And if he wanted my mother's land this badly, he wouldn't stop with one failed attempt. He would be back. He would escalate. I was ready for round 2. 2 days later, a brand new black Escalade crawled up our gravel drive. It was the kind of vehicle that screams blood money, a shark gliding through waters where it didn't belong. It was an invasive species in ranch country, and it was bringing trouble right to our doorstep. I stepped off the porch, my boots crunching on the stones, and planted myself directly between the vehicle and my mother's front door. I was the wall he would have to break through. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a man in his late 50s, dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my first truck. Gold cufflinks flashed like a rattlesnake's warning in the bright Texas sun. He was flanked by 2 more men, bigger and more professional-looking than the first crew, with the dead eyes and rigid posture of men who were paid well to do bad things. The man in the suit strode forward, his expensive Italian shoes crunching on the gravel. "Mr. Kane," he said, his voice as smooth and oily as a pipeline spill. "I am Benjamin Sterling. I understand there's been a misunderstanding with my contractors. I'm here to make this all go away, provided your mother is prepared to be reasonable." I kept my eyes locked on him, my posture relaxed but ready, my voice flat. "And by reasonable, Mr. Sterling, you mean signing over her deed for 10 cents on the dollar?" He smiled, a cold, predatory thing that didn't reach his eyes. "We both know this land is wasted on cattle and barns. My investors have plans for a luxury golf community. You can either accept my very generous offer of $250,000, or you can deal with the consequences." His mistake was issuing a threat to a man who has faced down death itself. The bodyguard to his right took a single step forward. I didn't hesitate. I exploded forward, driving the palm of my hand into his chest. It was a concussive strike, designed to shock the system and take the air out of his lungs. He stumbled backward, crashing into the side of the Escalade with enough force to make the heavy vehicle rock on its suspension. The second bodyguard reached for the inside of his jacket, but I was already moving. I hooked his arm, spun him off balance, and dropped him into the dirt at his boss's feet. Sterling took a half step back, his composure finally cracking, his smug mask replaced with a flash of genuine fear. "You think you can stop progress?" he barked, his voice suddenly shrill. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit the sheriff's number on speed dial, the speakerphone on. "I already have," I informed him, as Sheriff Henderson's voice answered. "Sheriff, it's Kane. Benjamin Sterling is on my property, attempting to coerce a 93-year-old woman. That's on top of the charges from 2 days ago." I looked Sterling dead in the eye. "You sent 3 felons to threaten my mother. I have every second of it on high-definition video. Now we can add attempted coercion, criminal conspiracy, and witness intimidation to your growing list of charges under the RICO Act." I let a cold smile touch my lips. "Oh, and by the way, I'm a Navy SEAL. You lost the physical fight before you even got out of your car." A distant siren began to wail, growing louder with each passing second. Sterling's face went pale. He tried to scramble back into his Escalade, but he didn't make it. The sheriff's cruiser slid to a stop, blocking him in. Cuffs clicked, doors slammed, and the Escalade, the symbol of his corrupt empire, was hooked up to a tow truck and dragged away. The takedown of Sterling's criminal enterprise was swift and total. My body cam footage, coupled with the testimony of his first crew who had turned on him for a lighter sentence, was the linchpin for the district attorney's RICO case. The news reports were glorious. They detailed how Sterling had built his fortune by terrorizing elderly landowners across the state, using his fake enforcement company to manufacture disputes and force them to sell. Other victims, emboldened by our stand, came forward. A class action lawsuit buried him and his company under an avalanche of legal claims. He was denied bail, his assets were frozen, and he was ultimately convicted on multiple felony counts of racketeering and extortion. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. A few weeks later, a formal letter arrived from the district attorney's office, thanking me for my courage and invaluable assistance in bringing down a major criminal operation. But the real victory was quieter. It was the peace that settled back over our ranch. It was the sound of the wind in the old oak trees, and the sight of my mother, sitting on the porch in her favorite rocking chair, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Her legacy was safe. She looked over at me, her eyes bright and clear. "Well," she said, her voice full of that unbreakable Texas steel, "I guess we're not selling." I smiled back at her, the setting sun warm on my face. No, Mom. We're not selling. We're making damn sure no one ever has the courage to try this again. Because if they do, I'll be waiting.